is the worst possible Wordle score? It's tempting to say 0, right? No greens, no yellows, all grays. But a game of Wordle has 30 letters. There are only 26 in the alphabet. And Wordle doesn't just let you guess the same letter 5 times in a row. There's a list of words it will accept as a guess. So can we actually get to the end without scoring a single green or yellow letter? Can we score a perfectly wrong Wordle game? Now, before we go off the deep end, let's be reasonable and just try it. Here's a random game of Wordle from the archive. I didn't know what the correct word was, but I knew I wanted to avoid it. So I started with whiff, relatively uncommon letters, and a double F. The result? All grays, a great start. So I tried the repeating letters trick again with dryly, and that worked as well. At this point, my keyboard was getting limited, so I had to take a risk on mumps. There's an S in there, but it kept on working. Finding these double letters was getting hard, but I managed to find booze. This felt like it would be a fantastically terrible guess with that Z, but it turned out to be devastating. 2 yellows, 2 greens. And with nothing left on my keyboard, I had no choice but to concede. I lost wrong Wordle. Okay, so playing Wordle wrong on purpose is surprisingly difficult, but it's also surprisingly fun. You get to play weird words that almost never come up otherwise. Your keyboard shrinks with every guess, forcing you into more dangerous letters as the game goes on. Even just getting to the end can be a challenge, let alone getting there with a low score. And wrong Wordle has a high ceiling for mastery. Every individual letter counts, which gives you a lot of room to improve your personal best. I genuinely recommend that you play wrong Wordle, especially if regular Wordle has gotten a bit stale. That being said, a fun game does not answer my question. What is the worst possible Wordle score? Can we achieve all grays? In fact, playing wrong Wordle revealed that the question is more complicated than it seems. Not every answer will have the same worst possible score. So not only do we need to find the lowest scoring guesses for any given answer, we also need to find which answer out of all possible answers has the lowest score, which is harder, but it's not unsolvable. Wordle has that list of possible guesses, but it also has a list of possible answers. It's maybe not the most elegant idea, but technically speaking, we can just compare every answer to every guess and see which combination scores the lowest. I mean, Wordle is big, but it is still finite. One thing is obvious. We're not going to check every possible game by hand. We need to build a machine that can check Wordle games for us. Something that can take some answer, run through every guess in that list, and pick out the worst one. If we can get that working to find the worst guess for a given answer, we should be able to just repeat it 6 times to find the 6 worst guesses. Running through the list of guesses is actually pretty simple. We can just put them all in a column and... Oh. That is a lot of guesses. Okay, a single column is maybe not the most legible format. Let's print them out in sheets. 60 pages gives us a copy of every possible guess. So we just need a machine to run through these pages and find the worst guess for the answer printed on the cover. That machine needs to be able to evaluate a guess, and to do that, it needs to evaluate every letter in a guess. First, it compares each letter in the guess to the corresponding letter in the answer. If they line up, the machine marks the letter as green. Then, it compares each letter in the guess to every other letter in the answer. If any of those match up, the machine marks it as yellow. Otherwise, it marks the letter as gray. Running through a couple of guesses, it looks like everything is working as intended, but the results are kind of hard to read, so let's convert the green, yellow, gray format into a numerical score. We'll score a gray letter as 0 points, a yellow as 10, and a green letter as 20 points. That alone creates a functional scoring system, but we can get away with something clever here as well. We want the machine to prioritize words with reused letters. After all, once a letter becomes gray, it can't be used again. So to minimize our final score, we'll want to use gray letters as many times as possible before they're taken out of circulation. It might seem complicated to communicate that to our machine, but we can just add the number of unique letters to a guess's final score. Assuming that all of these turn out to be gray, a machine trying to find the lowest scoring guess will prioritize stats over first, minimizing the number of letters it takes out of circulation. With this scoring system in mind, we can have the machine tally up a score for each guess. Now, it just needs to pick out which guess scores the lowest, which means it will need to remember the lowest score it's found so far, so we'll have to give it a bit of storage to keep track of that. Armed with that new bit of storage, we can run through every guess we just evaluated. Starting with the first guess, we can have the machine store that guess as the current lowest score, since that's the only one it's checked so far. Then it moves on to the next one. If the new guess scored lower than whatever it has stored here, it swaps the old guess out for the new one. Repeat that process for every guess the machine has evaluated, and by the end it should have the worst guess stored conveniently in this designated spot. Of course, this is just a sampling of potential answers. To actually get the worst guess for the answer title, we need to unleash this machine on a full 60-page book. Okay, that seems to be working. Wordle accepts a gag as a guess for some reason, so now we just need the other 5 guesses. Unfortunately, we did get green and yellow all over these pages, but that's fine. We can just print out another copy for the next guess. Well, actually, 5 new copies, one for each remaining guess the machine needs to find. So instead of a 60-page book, we need a 360-page book, which is a lot, but that's the point of the machine. It does all the hard work for us. So it should just be a matter of feeding the next section of guesses into the machine and seeing what it generates. Okay, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. It's not carrying any context over between guesses, so it lands on the same worst guess every time. But when it finds that first guess, the machine locks in some green, yellow, and in this case, gray letters. It needs to remember that it can't use these letters anymore. So we'll need some more storage to keep track of the letters we find. Let's start with the grays. No gray letters are allowed to show up in a potential guess, so we'll need the machine to skip any guesses which include grays. Whenever the machine finds an optimally terrible guess, any gray letters in that guess will be copied here. So when it's evaluating a potential next guess, it needs to check if any of the letters in that guess match any of the letters stored in this gray area. If any of them do match, the guess has to be skipped. Green letters follow the opposite rule. Every green letter the machine finds must be present in the next guess. And unlike grays, position matters here, so we'll need to keep any greens the machine finds lined up with the guess being evaluated. As it evaluates potential guesses, it needs to check that the letters in the guess match any green letters stored here. If any of those pairs don't match, the guess is skipped. Yellow letters are a lot like greens. Every yellow must be present and position matters. But unlike Unlike the greens, a single position can have multiple corresponding yellows, so we need to give the machine 5 separate spaces, one for each letter. Once a new guess is locked in, the yellows are added to their corresponding list. Then, when it's evaluating guesses, the machine needs to make sure that every yellow letter from every list is found somewhere else in the guess. If any yellow fails that test, the guess must be skipped. Except that isn't quite enough. This test doesn't take into account that the yellow letter could have already been tested at this alternate position. So the machine also needs to check if the list of yellows corresponding to this alternate position already has that letter stored. If it does, the letter has already been tried there and the guess has to be skipped. Finally, any guess that manages to survive all of these tests can be evaluated as a candidate for the next worst possible guess. Okay, that is a lot of new functions. Let's put our new and improved machine up against a page of guesses just to check that it's working. So, there's really only one test left. A full 360-page book. A proper game of Wordle. If the machine can handle that, it should be ready to find the worst game of them all. The worst possible score you could achieve when the answer is title is by guessing Agag, Coco, Susus, Hi-Fi, Jin, and Imix. And for some reason, Wordle accepts all of those as guesses. So it worked. We have a machine that finds the 6 worst guesses for the answer printed on the front of the book. Now we just need to put the entire game of Wordle into these books. I mean, we just print out a new book for every possible answer, right? Then we have the machine run through all of those books and we pick out the worst one. There are 2,309 possible answers, which means we need 2,309 books, which is a library. This is everything Wordle has to offer. This is everything Wordle is. Every guess matched with every answer. This is everything wrong Wordle could be. Every single game, including the one that I'm looking for. Start the machine. This is taking forever. There's just... God, it turns out that 2,309 is a lot of books. At this rate, I am going to be here forever. Okay, there are some improvements we can make. The machine is running through every section of every book twice, once to evaluate the scores and again to find the lowest score. A lot of its time is spent just moving from one guess to the next. It already has a spot to keep track of the worst guess. If we just have it compare scores right when it calculates them, it can skip the entire second run. And we can get more clever with the order of operations. Right now, the machine runs through all of these steps to verify that a guess is allowed and then finally scores it. But scoring a guess is way faster than verifying it. So what if we just swap the order? Score the guess first and only verify it if the guess would actually be useful. We'd end up saving millions of operations that are being wasted verifying useless garbage. And while we're at it, we're not limited to just one machine. We can build a second machine. We can build a third, a fourth, a fifth, a fleet against which even the great library of Wordle will burn. So here we are, the very end of Wrong Wordle. The game is dead. I have my answer. The worst possible Wordle score is one yellow letter. One stupid yellow letter!